Come on, that's what I'm talking about. Got some music now.
There we go.
Now, I put down, I think last week, Galatians 5, 13 through 26, and we actually went through 13 through 15. So, I'm going to put the whole thing down again. Let's see, 5. 13 through 26. Because that all goes together. We're actually going to start at verse 16. I'm going to back up a little bit and kind of give us a rundown of what we had talked about last week. And then we're going to get into all the things that are bothersome, or the acts of sin. In Galatians, we have the acts of sin, and then we have the fruits of the Spirit. I don't know if we'll get time to get into the fruits of the Spirit today, and I hope we do. But if we don't, this is what we're planning for next week. And, you know, it's not often that I have a series of sermons that ties together, but this one is one of those that you just can't get it all in one service. You just can't do it. And we had talked, you know, from 13 through 15, it talks about the law of our laws are tied up in one word, and it's love. And it's the love of God. God's love for us is so strong, and He overpowers. Jesus came, and Jesus said, I didn't come to take away the law, but to fulfill the law. And He says to love me as I have loved you. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And honestly, this is where we're at. So he's setting us up to understand of where we are. And he's talking about, because see, Galatia were having a lot of issues in their churches. I can't imagine that, can y'all? Mm. They're having issues. There were quarrels going on. Well, that shouldn't happen in church, should it? But it does. We have differences, though. We don't always agree with everything. You know, if we got down to it and got on some different subjects somehow, all of us would have disagreements. You know, I might not agree with any of y'all about some things, and he may not agree with me about some things, and that's okay. But when we get to arguing, and we're actually putting away what we're here for, we can love one another without having to go there. Now that's easier said than done. Now, again, as I'm speaking today, if you get your toes stepped on, you got in my way between me and that mirror, because this is stout, and there's a lot of stuff. And I've had to study it to really understand what Paul is telling us through this. And there's a lot of other scriptures that we could use to follow up. That's not something that he wrote, but Peter and James have written as well. And it's like they all sat down together to write these things. I mean, it's just so beautiful. But God does that. You know, when we look at the scriptures, I'm going to say this, from beginning to the end, it looks like one author, don't it? Yet we have, what was it, 44 authors throughout the scriptures. We've got 66 books. But there's one true author, because he inspired the whole thing. And it looks like one person wrote it all. And he did basically through others. So, as we look at this, again in verse 15, I'm going to back up, like I said, it says you bite and devour one another. You have arguments and displacements in the church, things that shouldn't be. Stop what you're doing and look at yourselves first. Stop what you're doing and listen to yourselves. Where am I? And where am I with God? How am I loving my brothers and sisters? But then he turns right around and he goes from that to talking about the flesh. Now we know that the flesh is carnal. And in truth, we have no purpose in heaven with the flesh. Because when we leave this old world, we're not going to take this body with us, are we? He's going to give us a new body. I can't wait. It may not be that pretty that my next one is, and ain't either. But it's going to be better than this one. It's going to be so much better. And I can't wait for that day. And, but while I'm living in this world, I am in the flesh. You are in the flesh. We all are. That's not to make an excuse. Because so many times we want to say, well, I can't help it. Made me think of just Flip Wilson. Used to have the Flip Wilson show, and you know, a lot of folks have never even heard of Flip Wilson, but he was a comedian too. But I love some of the things he did. But one of them was Geraldine, and he would come up as Geraldine. He said, "The devil made me do it." You know, whatever it was, the devil made me. And sure enough, and he does. He does. See, Satan will come to us in so many different ways. He can't get to us one way; he'll come another way. He's always seeking a way to get to us. And I say that because I've said this many times as well before. When Jesus Christ was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and that ain't where it ended, Satan was constantly trying to tempt him and get him to disown God, to be a service to him. And I'm thinking, here he is. He knows who Jesus Christ is. He knows who he is, knows he's the Son of God, knows he's the Almighty. He is, as John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. That was Jesus Christ. He knows and he's still trying to convince him to do otherwise, to worship him instead of the God. He's even offered to give him all these things of the world, and you know what? He's saying these things and tempting in a constant manner. And Jesus Christ spoke this in the being. He already owns it. But Satan won't stop. And this is where we come into play right here with the flesh and the spirit. Because what we have in these next few, I think it's through 16 through 21, is going to be the acts of sin. This is a group of words and stuff that most times we don't want to talk about. Really don't want to have to get into this. Well, we can just pass that. Let's get to the good stuff. Well, we have to get through this junk to realize where we are, to get to the good stuff. And the good stuff is the things of the fruits of the Spirit. And I can't wait to even get into that part and talk even more about that. But we must go through this. In verse 16 it says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would. But if you be led of the Spirit, you're not under the law." Well, what is the law? The things that we're not to do. Even like the 10 Commandments. Well, if we're in the Spirit, we don't have to worry about being under the law because we're following what God wants us to do. Does that mean we're perfect? No, not by any means. And this is where we come into play with some of these things. He tells us there's two things here in essence. One is those who don't want to believe in him whatsoever. They're going to live in these things in most cases. But those who are in the Spirit, you're still going to be challenged with these things. You're still going to have to face them. You're still going to be tempted with them. But when you walk in the Spirit, you do everything you can to stay out of those things. So he says, the Spirit lusts after the flesh, and the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. What does that mean? The flesh, again, is carnal. And we have all these wants and desires and all these things of our own mind and our own natures. And the Spirit of God is not of that. Well, I've even had people ask me, say, well, why did God make us the way we did? Because he's also given us a choice, hasn't he? He's given us a choice to be able to choose one or the other. To choose him or not to choose him.
Freedom.
We got that freedom. That's what he was talking about before in the earlier verses, that we do have that freedom. We got that freedom to be with him. And it's so beautiful. But it's hard because we don't understand it all. We want things just handed to us, don't we? In most cases we do, you know. But as we get into this, let's look at, it says the works of the flesh, in verse 19. The works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. And he names a bunch of things, and I went again through the dictionary, and I wrote each one of these words down, and what the dictionary says they are. And we have to ask ourselves when we study this, and I'm begging that you do go back and study this whole thing, and be in prayer about it, that God shows you. Because these things are even more personal with us when it comes to the Spirit of God than even what the dictionary accounts for. But the first one is adultery. I'll just read some of these off. It says adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven. I'm like, wait a minute. There's times I still fall into some of this junk. I don't mean to, but I still do. Does that mean I'm not going to enter into heaven? No. That's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying, because he says those who stay in this and don't try to get out, those who aren't praying to God, those who aren't seeking Jesus Christ, then you don't have a place in heaven. Does that make sense? When we seek some of this stuff on a total basis to ignore God, then we're not living for him, we're living for self. Let's go to the first one, adultery. That's a voluntary sexual intercourse between a married person and someone other than their lawful spouse. That's where adultery is. Fornication is that voluntary and sexual intercourse between two unmarried persons or two persons not married to each other. Uncleanness says not clean or dirty, and not necessarily because of the skin or whatever, but you know, not taking a bath. It's not clean and dirty morally. Impure, evil, and violent. Unclean thoughts. So many times we'll fall into the uncleanness and don't even realize it. I also have to say this while I'm on that subject, uncleanness. There's sometimes somebody can say something and will trigger a joke that I can remember from way back when, and I wish I could forget it. I won't tell it to anybody because I don't want them to get it stuck in their head either. But again, this is one of those things that Satan loves to bring back. And then it makes you feel like, you know, just this little, because you thought of it. Well, here's the thing. When we have that thought, we need to get rid of the thought when? Immediately, don't we? We don't sit there and dwell on it. If we dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it, we're indulging in it. Does that mean we still can't be forgiven? No, we still can. But we don't use this as an excuse. I can do whatever I want, man. I just ask for forgiveness and I'm good. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're saying. But when we're living in the Spirit, we strive to stay in the Spirit, even though we may fall into some of this junk sometimes, and we try to get it out. If it ain't bothering you, if any of this stuff does not bother you any whatsoever, you got to question yourself where you are in the Spirit. I'm serious. We have to question, where am I with God if this stuff isn't bothering me? So now we have lasciviousness. That's unrestrained sexual behavior or habitual inclination to do such behavior. Lustfulness, a lustful or lewd quality, the act of arousing sexual desire. Idolatry, the religious worship of idols. Well, wait a minute. We're not worshiping some idol, are we? Do we? Now, we've mentioned this, we've talked about idols before, But one of my things is what you think about and talk about the most, there's your God.
Mhm.
It really is. And we don't want to even admit that, do we? But it's the truth. What we think about and talk about the most in our life, that's our God. We're allowing that to be our God. So what are some idols? I do want to just kind of talk about that.
Money and greed. Money and greed.
Money's not that evil, but it's the root of it. It is the root. What else?
iPads and Facebook and telephones and I could go on and on.
Yes, absolutely.
Actors, TV.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And that is so true, because there's so many times people don't realize how much they worship that. Also, you know, something that idolatry is a religious act of worship of idols, excessive or blind adoration, you know, not even realizing it, reverence or devotion, etc. An idol is an image or other material object representing the deity to which religious worship is addressed. It's also an image of directly other than God, the deity itself. Any person or thing regarded with blind adoration, and devotion. A figment of the mind is a fantasy. So many times it can even be just a fantasy that we idolize and not realize we're idolizing it. Now, y'all have mentioned a bunch of things, but there's so many other things out here that it could be. It could be a hobby. Well, wait a minute. That's a God-given talent, ain't it? If we use it for His glory. We can give God glory no matter what we're doing, if we're seeking His will and doing it for His glory. We just can't. So, again, when we talk about the idols can even fall into the adultery and the fornication, uncleanness, into the lasciviousness. Idols can even fall into that category because we're idolizing somebody else or something else. But the idols are this is such a big avenue of where we could go with idols and different things. And we fail to see it so many times. I have to admit on this, I don't cook that great. I don't get to cook that much, but I love looking at recipes. I bet I've got 5,000 recipes stored and think I'm gonna go back and, am I idolizing it? If I'm not careful, I could. I could very well just, get so caught up in that. That sounds silly, but that's one of my things. I don't know what yours are. You have other things, and that may be one of them too. I don't know. But we can do these kinds of things and not even realize it. Again, like it was mentioned with actors or actresses or some TV sitcom or show or movie that it's all about that. Anything that takes us away from God's thoughts. Sheldon and I was talking about this yesterday with so many things, and she got to go to listen to a speaker that I preached on. Been about a month or so, about 2 months ago maybe, on 2 of the books that this lady has written. I think her last name is Hill, Dorothy Hill. Is that right, Sheldon?
Dorothy Hill Gates.
Gates, okay, has written some devotionals, and she's done it for women, but undoubtedly, I love it. So we talked about faith on that first go round, and having faith and getting into the faith and what it means. And I'm not getting on that subject today, but as we were talking about that, we were talking about life today, the thing that she got to go hear yesterday, and it was so awesome. But it had to do with some of these things, and we have a tendency to put even our faith in the wrong places. When we put our faith in the wrong places, we're not putting our faith in Jesus Christ. We have to be careful even not to put our faith, don't put your faith in the pastor. I'm going to tell you that right now. Do not put your faith in me, I will let you down. Don't put your faith in yourself, you're going to let yourself down. God's the only one that we need to truly put our faith in and our strength in. And that's who we need to seek. Because we can become our own idols even. And we never realize that, but we can become our own idol, become our own gods. How many times have you prayed and asked God to do something, and then you go on and try to fix it for Him? We do, don't we? Well, what we're doing is say, I got this, God. I'm asking you to take care of it, but I want you to do it my way, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And what we're doing is saying, I'm my own God. No, I'm not saying that, am I? That's what we're doing. We're making ourselves our own gods. I can't do anything without Him, and I know that. It took me a long time to admit that because I was always one of those, I can do it. I have a lot of abilities, but I can't do it without Him. So then we're going to get into witchcraft. Witchcraft is the art, the practice of a witch, or sorcery or magical influence. Magic, especially for evil purposes, the modern practice of magic as a spiritual observance, especially as associated with neo-paganism or Wicca. Now, when we speak of this, I have to admit I've always been amazed by magic and the magic tricks. Most of it is sleight of hand, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Most of it is sleight of hand. We just don't understand it all. But when it becomes a God in itself, or that becomes the main thing in life, now that magic has overruled God Himself. I hope I'm making myself clear on that one. The witchcraft. And it's out there. I promise you it's out there. I can remember one time I was still in high school. I had somebody call me up. I would dial the telephones that we had. I didn't know who it was. Of course, you couldn't see who it was, or, if they don't tell you, you didn't know who unless you recognize their voice. But they called me all kinds of things that, and said they were putting spells on me. I said, great. And they did. And I truly believe that they believed that. Now, I don't believe it to the fact that I'm scared of that, because my God is more powerful than that. But a lot of things started happening to me that I couldn't explain. And even then, I wasn't following God. And I didn't realize what was happening until years later. But it happened. All kinds of junk. I didn't let it get to me because I didn't believe in their witchcraft. Do they? Yeah. They believe in it very strong. There are some places we have that are so into witchcraft. Some cities, that's the thing. And they believe it with all their heart. But what they're doing is drawing up spirits. What kind of spirits? Evilness. Do we have evil spirits in the world? Why, certainly. But we also have good spirits in the world as well. I don't care to focus on those evil spirits. I let God handle that because I can't. Let Him handle those things that's in the witchcraft. Let Him handle those who want to follow on those things. But what can I do about that? Can I love them anyway? Well, what other things can fall into the witchcraft? If we're not believing in Jesus Christ, we're not believing in the scriptures themselves, then a lot of things can fall into that category and we don't even realize it. Again, and I'm saying this and I feel like I'm repeating myself, and it may be. But it's something that we need to understand. There's a lot of people around us on a daily basis who fall into this category and we don't even know it. They don't even know it. But if they're not following Jesus Christ, they're following something. I can promise you that. Everybody's going to believe in something, one way or the other. And the scriptures tell us that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. I don't want to be that one who says, well, I knew you, I thought of you. And He says, I know you not. I can't imagine what it's gonna be like for those who goes to hell, and he tells them, I know you knew it. I never knew you. Why, wait a minute. Doesn't he know everything about all of us? But he says, I never knew you. The truth is, we never knew him. So he never got to know us because of it. So those who don't believe. Well, what's that got to do with us as Christians? I can just do my thing. Well, if we're following his will, walking in the Spirit like he's telling us, and we're going through all this junk that we're talking about, we don't want to see anybody else go through these things either. We want to help them with it. We want to pray for them. We want to love them through it. There's people who follow in practices of other religions that I think fall into the witchcraft. And they may not think of it as witchcraft. But if it's not of God, it's something else. And so many of them falls into the next one, hatred. Well, there's a lot of things I hate. What does God hate? He does hate sin. He despises sin. But he loves the sinners. And that's hard to do. It is hard to love someone who is unlovable. It's really hard to love someone who is unlovable. Sometimes we build up a hatred toward them, don't we? I've had hate in my life many times. And when God started working on me, he had to show me I had to get rid of the hatred. Because that hatred, that builds up anger. The hatred, the feeling of one who hates, intense dislike or extreme aversion or hostility. You ever thought about taking somebody out? Well, I just kill them. You know, most of us all have thought of that. I hope not today. But we have. We've had these thoughts. We've felt these things. And this hatred continues to build up, and it builds up that anger. And the anger just continues. And I think we got anger coming up in here somewhere. Bear with me. It'll be close. So we have the hatred. All these things will fall in these other religions, these other beliefs, just like the witchcraft that we're talking about. We don't think of things around us being as witchcraft. But the truth is, there are practices of witchery going on, like the Wicca, and there's other religions too that practice different things of witchcraft. I've never really studied it. Right now I'm still too busy trying to study what the scriptures tells me is right. I don't need to go learn everything that's wrong. I've already been there too many times. The next one is variance. He says the state of quality of being variable or divergent, different or anomalous, discrepancy. You know, as between two statements of the law that should agree, but you want to disagree. A departure from the cause of action, state of disagreement. Even in the churches, see, we have a lot of times in the churches we have a state of disagreement because this one doesn't agree with that, or doesn't agree with this. Maybe they don't agree with the bylaws of the church. I'll have to admit that I've had one time in my life where I didn't agree with the bylaws of the church. I'm not in that church anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't want to get ugly. But I didn't agree with everything. I want to make sure I'm in line with what the Word says. That's where we need to be. Emulation, just effort or desire to equal or excel others. It's jealousy or rivalry. Again, some of these I had to look up. I had no idea what some of this stuff meant. But we have jealousy of others sometimes. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I know good and well every one of us have been jealous of something or somebody in some way. Then we have wrath. And that's where that strong or fierce anger, the deeply resentful, indignation, vengeance or punishment as the consequences of anger. Anger can make us do so many stupid things, can't it? Y'all ever acted out of anger? Thank you. We all have, haven't we? I gotta tell you. Some of y'all ever heard of Roy D. Mercer? He'd say, this is Roy D. Mercer. And he'd call you up on the phone and get you riled up. Of course, he was using some pretty colorful language sometimes. Next thing I know, he'd have them so riled up and mad, they're ready to fight. And he's talking about opening up a can of whipping them. I'm not gonna say all the stuff he says again. Use some pretty foul language and colorful language there. But used to, my brother and I, Harry Lee, as soon as a new one, Roy D. Mercer come out, he'd call me up, come on, we gotta go riding. And we'd have to go listen to it. And I'd have to make him stop sometimes. He'd be laughing so hard he couldn't drive. But he had the knack for being able to make someone so mad. But one time, he was really trying to make this guy mad, and the man was just as quiet and likable. So, well, sir, I'm just not going to go for that. I don't really want to fight you. Finally, he'd hang up on him. Long story short, he finally told me, told him who he was. It was a prank, and this and this and this. He said, the people that told me to call you said I wouldn't be able to get you riled. They said I wouldn't be able to get you all upset and angry. He said, well, I'm not really angry, but I did get a bat just in case. yeah, but you see what I'm saying? It was sometimes most people want to go just opposite. They want to blow up. And next thing you know, some of them were saying things back to him that they probably wish they hadn't said, especially if they knew they were being aired on the radio. But not this guy. And I thought, that's the way I need to be. It's like that guy. I don't know if the guy was a Christian or not, but I couldn't see him being anything else. The way he handled the whole situation. He never said anything ugly. He was completely nice and kind, trying to be appeasing. That's where we need to be sometimes, instead of letting the wrath and the anger or the strife, which is vigorous or bitter conflict, is the center of antagonism, a quarrel, struggle, or clash, competition or rivalry. That's where we get into the strife. We have seditions, heresies, and envyings. We got incitement or discontent, or rebellion in our seditions. Rebellion against what? Government, church, anything. Just rebellion. Any action, especially in speech or writing, promoting such discontent. Heresies is our opinion or doctrine of variance. We get back into the variance again with the orthodox or accepted doctrine. Heresies, we see this in the scriptures many times because they call somebody a heresy, a heretic. The maintaining of such an opinion or doctrine usually against what? The will of God. Sometimes these heresies, they think, we see in the scriptures where the Jews were so into their law that they left God out of it. Jesus came to fulfill the law, and they hated him. And they wanted to kill him, and they did. But God already had this plan for whose sake? Ours. To save us. Any belief in the heresy that is strongly at variance with established beliefs, customs, or etc. Envying things, feeling or discontent or covetousness with regard to another's advantages, success. Goes back to jealousy, doesn't it? So we have the envyings. Murders, the killing of another human being under conditions specifically covered in the laws, including murder committed with malice. And it goes back to the anger again. A forethought characterized by deliberations, being premeditated. Already you decided you're going to do this. But one thing it doesn't say about the murders, but the scriptures does. If we've thought it, we've done it in our heart. We've hated somebody that bad. We've murdered them. We've thought about it. We admitted that a while ago. Everyone's in here. We've had thoughts of, I could just kill them. Drunkenness. Intoxication of being temporary state of which one's physical and mental faculties are impaired by an excess of alcohol. Didn't say a thing that we couldn't drink. Does it? Doesn't say that. But when we get into the excess, what we're doing is we're relying on that. And in most cases, and just like this is talking about here, it's when that's what we're looking for all the time. That can even happen, any of these things can happen to us at a moment's notice. Because with something that happens to us in our life. We have revelings. To take great pleasure or delight, usually followed by indulging in boisterous festivities. To indulge into boisterous activities or rowdy, unrestrained. So in these revelings, again, what we're looking at today is the acts of sin. We hadn't even got to get to the fruits of the Spirit, and honestly, we didn't even get to cover all this like it needs to be covered. We've just kind of breezed through it. But if this is what we're living in on a constant basis, we have to question ourselves, where am I with Christ? If this is what we look for on a constant basis, any of these things, without being bothered by it, let me put it like that. Because every one of us, and I don't care who we are, every one of us can fall into most every category in here at any given time. It can happen. We may not want it to happen, may not mean it to happen, but it can happen. But if we continue in it and continue in it and continue in it, then we're not looking for the will of God. We're looking for self-satisfaction. And if we're looking for self-satisfaction, we will never find satisfaction. We will never be happy. We won't find the peace. We won't find anything that God offers. And we're going to talk about that next week. We won't find any of these things if we're indulging into this. Those things right there. The acts of sin. I'm going to challenge you, if you will, for you to go back and look these things up. Read these verses again, right here. You go back and look them up and see what God shows you. Look them up in the dictionary. See what it means, even though, well, I know what this word means. I know what that word means. But when you have a tendency to look it up and see the full explanation of it, it kind of hits, wow, I didn't think of it like that. So we have to also understand that everything in here doesn't have to be done physically by the flesh if we think it and we got it built into our hearts and our desires are these things, then we're following the wrong category. So we have to seek His will. And ask God to show you. Show each one of us. That's what we're to do. Show us. Show me where I am, Father, in your will today. If I'm living in any of these things, I'm asking you to change them. Where I can be in your will and follow the things of what's to come, which is the fruit of the Spirit. As we look, in the next week, we're going to be talking about the fruit of the Spirit. I can't wait. I like fruit. I like good fruit, real good fruit. And it's the best. I don't want to end on such a negative note that we're so all down and out, but we got something to look forward to. We got the fruit to look forward to. That only He can give us. Isn't it awesome? He can fill us with these things, and it will fill us more deeply than anything out there can. Again, we may fall into some of these categories, even partly. Don't stay there. Don't let your life be revolving around the junk. Don't let the junk that Satan keeps throwing at us, don't let that junk control you. And don't try to control it yourself. You don't have to. Get into prayer, deep prayer, beg, plead. And as we talk about that, let's go to our Lord in prayer at this time. As we go into prayer, if you'd like to come to the altar, by all means, if you wanna stay right there where you are, by all means. I don't care where we are, God's gonna be there anyway, right? Because we're His. So let's go to our Lord in prayer and take a few minutes into that. Let Him to show you these things. Or show you whatever, or just be silent. Sometimes we just need to be quiet, don't we? And you're probably thinking, I wish you would. Well, I'm fixing to be. It's my turn to be quiet now. Let us pray.